Okay, it is finally time for our last presenter of the day, Jackson Estes.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jackson Estes, and my senior thesis topic is on the wrongful suppression of military chaplains. In a society where religious freedom and speech are fundamental rights, it is critical that service members are allowed to openly share and express their religion without fear of restriction or reprisal. The military, while structured and disciplined, should not impose limits on the personal beliefs that its soldiers hold dear, beliefs that often serve as a source of strength, resilience, and moral guidance in the face of adversity. For many, religion is not just a private matter. It is a central aspect of their identity and a driving force behind their commitment to serve. Yet, in an environment that prioritizes unity and conformity, the struggle to openly share one's faith can be difficult. Service members may face subtle pressures to suppress their beliefs, or even fear that expressing their religion can be perceived as disruptive or wrong. However, fostering an environment that allows for religious expression, including the sharing of faith, is not only consistent with the core values of freedom and individual rights, but it can strengthen camaraderie, morale, and purpose within the military. In recent years, the United States military has unofficially restricted the religious freedoms of chaplains across all branches. Chaplains are now pressured to compromise their faith for fear of job loss, reprimands, or even military prison. Andrew Todd, an English professor from the University of Tennessee, speaks on this issue in his book, Military Chaplaincy in Contention. Kurt Cizik, a retired chaplain, addressed approximately 2,500 trainees at Lackland Air Force Base's Contemporary Christian Service about sins that we don't think that are that bad. Cizik spoke on topics such as homosexual and heterosexual sex and how sexual immorality remains an unspoken topic in churches nationwide. In the audience was a lesbian trainee who claimed that Cizik said all gays would burn in hell. Cizik said in a Fox News story, he thought the issue was done there, but they waited a few months and removed him from speaking in basic training and downgraded his performance report. The next year, they downgraded his performance report again, alongside with his promotion recommendation, which caused him to be passed over for promotion twice and involuntarily separated from the military in 2016. Despite 30 years of service, including 20 years of active duty, Cizik was denied his retirement pension, accounting to nearly $8 million, including $1 million in back pay. Despite escalating this issue up the chain of command, Cizik's issues had not been addressed. Cizik says that even if he said such things, he's protected under the First Amendment, freedom of religion. Cizik still fights this issue today despite former Vice President Mike Pence's intervention on his behalf. Chaplains are permitted to sharing their faith with others in the military, but only under strict regulations and guidelines. According to the Florida Times, pushing religious beliefs on those who don't want to hear them is a form of harassment and is strictly prohibited under the Department of Defense policies. How can chaplains spread their faith when it can be perceived as when it can be classified as harassment and is strictly prohibited? Author Andrew Todd says, so for the chaplain's faith, Andrew Todd says that the main role of a military chaplain is to be a moral leader and to maintain the best mental state for soldiers. He adds, so for the chaplain's faith is communicated as much by being as by doing, and by example rather than seeking to convert. Chaplains are akin to therapists. They assist soldiers with a range of issues, helping them focus on their duties. While it is important to help soldiers from diverse religious backgrounds, Matthew 28, 19 through 20 instructs Christians to go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Since every Christian is called to share the gospel, should chaplains not be able to? Does our country view proselytizing outside the bounds of religious practice? Elise Steiner, in the diminishing free speech rights of military chaplains in the aftermath of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell rights, chaplains are entitled to preach whatever they think is necessary, but they certainly wouldn't be allowed to go out speaking against homosexuality. It is essential for Christians to share the gospel and lead by example. Chaplain Kurt Cizik says that Christians have always been countercultural, but so is the military. That works in our favor. Multiple times while serving, Cizik had people walk up to him and ask him, "Why do you believe what you do?" At that point, one is free to openly share the gospel. Cizik says that the primary role of chaplains are to help people solve problems. Cizik recalls at his first base, a Muslim airman came up to him who had been paying out of pocket for halal food and not eating in the dining facilities. When Cizik heard this, he went to the Muslim airman's commander and got him the money back that he deserved and a monthly stipend to help him pay for these meals. When the Muslim airman heard this, he tracked Cizik down and thanked him himself for the work that he did. Cizik's point, serving people well opens up opportunities to sharing the gospel. D.L. Moody, an American evangelist, once stated, "If a man is filled with the word of God, you cannot keep him still. If a man is filled with the word, he must speak or die." If Christians are called to share the gospel regardless of circumstances, why are chaplains restricted by governmental rules on sharing their own faith? Chaplains should be able to openly share the gospel with as many soldiers as possible. Have you ever heard the saying, "There's no atheist in the foxhole"? This is due to the intense pressures that service members face in conflict and war. These pressures force one to put hope in a God that they might survive their struggle. It should be a major concern for our country that service members are sent into war and conflict without ever hearing the word of God. Some service members do not return home from deployments. Chaplains should be able to share the gospel with as many soldiers as possible, giving them something greater to believe in, even if not explicitly requested. While no one should be forced to believe, everyone should have the opportunity to hear and potentially be saved. The Washington Times article, "U.S. Military Hostile to Christians Under Obama," states, "Christians are leaving the U.S. military or discouraged from joining in the first place due to a hostile work environment that doesn't allow them to express their religion." This trend is troubling and indicates a shift away from our country's historical embrace of Christianity within the military. The United States Chaplain Corps has a rich history that begins with the Continental Congress officially recognizing them on July 29, 1775, a month after the creation of the Army and a year before the creation of our country in 1776. Christian chaplains are deeply embedded in our nation's military, and undermining their role could have detrimental effects in our nation and Army. While some believe that chaplains who often provide spiritual guidance and support within a secular environment may undermine the principle of spiritual neutrality that is essential for maintaining a diverse and inclusive military force, others argue for a complete inclusiveness on all religions, including atheism and agnosticism. Michael Weinstein, an American attorney, former Air Force officer, and founder and president of Military Religious Freedom Foundation, fought for the separation of church and state within the military. At Shaw Air Force Base, Weinstein fought to take down a nativity scene voted on and set up by Christian service members at Shaw Air Force Base. Weinstein called the Pentagon and in 15 minutes had the baby Jesus wrapped up and being taken away. Fox News says that it brought Christians together who are frankly tired of having their religious freedoms systematically being taken away. The reason why we are hearing about so many of these attacks on Christians is not because the number of attacks have increased, but more and more Christians, both civilians and service members, are saying enough is enough. If this is an appropriate way to govern the military, the very force that fights for our freedoms, why are there so many attempts and successful suicides, rampant alcohol and drug abuse, and increasing numbers on divorce? Since 9/11, more than 30,000 veterans have died by suicide. That is 4 times the amount that have died during war. The fact that our country has more soldiers lost after the war than during it highlights the alarming and severe mental struggles that our service members face. Statistics on alcohol abuse among veterans are alarming. With more than 80%, nearly 900,000 veterans struggle with alcoholism. Nearly 27%, or around 300,000, are addicted to drugs. And 7%, about 80,000 veterans, grapple with both drug and alcohol abuse. Divorce rates among couples are 4.8%, compared to 2.5% for non-military couples. Military couples are almost twice as likely of having a divorce than non-religious couples, non-military couples. Clearly, something needs to change in our armed forces to ensure veterans and service members receive the help that they need. When a Christian chaplain is restricted from sharing their faith or preaching the gospel, they are essentially being silenced in their primary role as ministers. They are unable to fulfill the very calling that they have been ordained for, to serve as a witness to the transformative power of the gospel. This is not something that can be simply set aside or ignored in the name of neutrality or inclusivity. The gospel is a message that brings life, hope, and purpose, and soldiers and veterans need that most. Many argue that this approach of spiritual neutrality or the reduction of religious expression has led to a genuine void of emotional and spiritual care that some service members need. The mental health challenges can often be led back to a lack of meaning and purpose, which is where faith-based guidance programs has historically played a crucial role. On the other hand, critics argue that the military must remain neutral as it serves individuals from diverse religious, spiritual, and non-religious backgrounds. The concern is that an overtly Christian approach might alienate those who do not want to share that belief, thus creating division. The mental health crisis within the military calls for more than just reform to policy or treatment. It calls for a cultural shift that values the emotional and spiritual well-being of service members, not just physical. It is not enough for the military just to be inclusive in name. It must also be inclusive in its willingness to help provide the full range of support that its service members need. Ultimately, the question of spiritual neutrality in the military is not just about legal interpretation or policy. It is about ensuring that service members, regardless of their background, are given every opportunity to heal and find meaning and live fulfilling, resilient lives. If faith can be a part of that healing, then chaplains must be enabled to serve in the ways they see fit, without fear of restriction or reprisal. The principles of religious freedom that define this nation should be upheld, not for just civilians, but those who wear the uniform and defend the nation's values. Thank you. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions.
Yes, thanks for doing that. I am curious how you picked this topic.
Yes, sir. So my plan is to go into the military. I want to fly for them, but my main concern is how do I glorify God in that when it could be a position that, you might have to take lives or things like that. And so I started talking to neighbors that fly B-52s, people who used to serve in the military, and just wondering how can I glorify God in what I'm trying to pursue as a career. And one time I heard this guy, and he said, sharing the gospel in the military is very hard because people can just say, hey, this guy's harassing me, I don't want to hear this. And I thought what was interesting he said is you don't want to be a chaplain because they don't necessarily share the gospel that much. And I was like, well, I thought that's what chaplains do. And he was like, no, they're mainly type of a therapist that people can go talk to without having a therapist title on them. And so I thought that was very interesting, and I did some research in it, and I found Kurt Isaac's story of how he was sharing the gospel, doing a simple sermon, and his whole, career was taken away from him. And so I thought that was very interesting.
I appreciate it. And so I guess the two questions. One, is there clear suppression of military chaplains if they've been told you cannot do this kind of thing? And you might unpack it a little bit more.
Yes, sir. So there is a rule called "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," where if someone doesn't ask for any religious advice or anything, you cannot tell them about it. And so, in that way, there is suppression in chaplains, and how the stories that I have put in my paper of chaplains of how they've been suppressed from even just sharing simple things.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. And so I have a good friend who used to be at Barksdale, and he actually got removed because he refused to write a letter to a gay couple getting married.
Mm-hmm.
Who's an officer.
Yes, sir.
And he's since got restored, but I imagine that as a Christian going to the Air Force, to the military, that's got to be a fear of yours. I'm curious, there's President Trump's trying to push against kind of LGBT openness or whatever. I'm curious if you think anything's going to change due to some of these movements.
Well, since the writing of my paper, Donald Trump has banned trans and gays in the military. He has banned that, and I already wrote my paper when that came out. But I do think that, from Shreveport Bossier, of just people I've talked to that have served in the military, that there is a community idea that I can't really share with others openly at my job. I can just share by example of how I treat people and how I conduct myself. And I do think that there's more reform to come, hopefully in the future, for our military to come back to its how Christianity was embraced in the military.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I guess one of my questions I have for you is, do you think the military should be do you think there should be this secular culture where all religions are accepted, right? You can be a soldier, you can be Hindu, you can be a Catholic, you can be an atheist, right? Whatever. Is that okay? Or should there just be a preference for no, we're just going to be Christian, right? The United States is traditionally a Christian nation. We're going to be a Christian military. Should it be one? Which one should it be?
I do believe that every chaplain, which I also thought was interesting, there is chaplains for atheism, agnosticism, and that stuff, which I was surprised. I do believe that every chaplain should be able to share their faith openly. It's up to the service member to be like, oh yeah, that's cool. I want to, hear that and become that. I do believe that every chaplain should be able to share their faith openly, even if that's Hindu.
So you think it should just be the secular, let's just tolerate everything, right?
Yes, sir.
So isn't that, okay. So, but whenever we just tolerate everything, aren't we just accepting that atheism, secularism is the norm? By default.
Of everyone by default of everyone in the military is atheism or agnosticism.
Well, that's basically what is going to be culturally what's accepted.
No, I believe that, I took a Christianity approach on this. So I believe that, us Christians, we're called to share the gospel, and I believe that allowing chaplains and others in the military to, serve out their religious beliefs, every one of them should be open to that, even if it's, a Muslim trying to convert a Christian. It just shouldn't be forced on each other. It should be just, hey, I believe this, and would you like to learn more of this? No, I'm good. It should be like that. And
Isn't that already the policy?
well, the policy is that if you start asking about it and trying to tell that, someone can say, hey, you're harassing me, and that person gets their whole career taken away, and they, like Isaac, he lost his retirement pension. But I do think that there should be more of a, I feel like in the military, religion shouldn't be a hard topic to talk to, especially if you're going into other parts of the country with people. I think that should be a major concern to help your brothers and sisters in arms.
I kind of want to ask a little bit more about kind of dovetailing with what Mr. Davis said. It seems like, I guess I'm asking for further clarification. It seems like you're saying this don't ask, don't tell thing. Is this an official policy, or is it an unofficial kind of unwritten kind of policy by which the military functions?
I believe it's an official policy that they have. I could look more into that, but I do believe it's an official policy that they have as the military.
And so, this isn't a gotcha question, but did you happen to talk to any current military chaplains to get some information about your thesis?
Not current. I talked to Kurt Isaac, and he's a former, because like I said, he got out of the military in 2016, and he's still fighting his case. I talked to him and interviewed him.
I missed that fact. That's cool.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know a situation that you'd be put, a circumstance in which you'd be put in this situation, but say someone is considering going into a career as a military chaplain, would you advise them to do that or to not do that, and why?
I would honestly say if you want to, share the gospel and hopefully see change in the community, I would say not necessarily to go to the military route, just because there is that, stress that I could lose my job from this if, the right circumstances happen of someone gets offended. But that's what I would say. I'd say I'd rather, maybe you would want to work at a church or anything like that.
And maybe I should have asked even more about this. I guess I'm thinking about if I went to a country where blatant persecution existed. I'm specifically thinking about China, where it is against the law to proselytize. It would be difficult to go there with the express purpose of sharing the gospel. It can be done, and so maybe if there's an official policy that would prohibit proselytization or sharing the gospel from the Christian point of view, it would be difficult if you were a Christian and wanted to be a chaplain, but not maybe impossible. I guess there's
Yes,
a
sir.
difference between who you are and what you do, like what your job is. So
Yes, sir.
You can. Those are two kind of different things, and so maybe I should have said more about that. But it sounds like what you're saying is you don't think it would be, if you're looking to make a difference, it would be difficult, and you wouldn't encourage someone to do that.
Yes, sir. Just as talking to Kurt Isaac, he said chaplains just help people solve problems necessarily, not necessarily preaching the word, but like he said, helping people solve problems well opens up opportunities to sharing the gospel.
Sure.
Yes, sir. All right, if there's no further questions, thank you.